The certified envelope landed on Marisol Reyes' front step like a small explosion of dread. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Sunlight glaring off the crisp legal letterhead inside. Her eyes locked onto a single number that made her knees buckle against the porch railing. $348,000. Demanded for damages caused by an inflatable kiddie pool. She gasped aloud, pressing the paper against her chest as her daughter watched in confusion. This is insane. Her voice cracking under the weight of pure disbelief. Marisol was not even a member of the Sunridge Meadows Homeowners Association down the street. She rented a small house just outside the official boundary line, clearly marked on county maps. Yet here was a lawsuit, claiming she violated covenants belonging to a community she never joined. Her daughter Lily splashed happily in the small blue plastic pool nearby. The pool had been a birthday gift, bought to survive one brutal Texas summer week. Marisol remembered the day the trouble began. With a knock that shattered her quiet afternoon. Diane Whitfield marched up wearing a crisp linen blazer. She carried a clipboard like a weapon, eyes scanning the yard with cold disapproval. That pool violates our community aesthetic standards, Diane announced. Marisol blinked, explaining politely that her rental sat outside the official HOA boundary. Diane sneered. Suggestions when it came to preserving neighborhood property values. You people always think rules don't apply to you, Diane muttered under her breath. The comment stung deeply, carrying an ugly weight Marisol recognized from painful past experiences. She was an immigrant from Guatemala, working 2 jobs to build a stable life here. Her late husband had been a Marine veteran, killed in a training accident years earlier. She raised Lily alone now, proud and fiercely protective of their small rented home. Diane snapped photographs of the pool, muttering threats about fines and potential legal consequences. Marisol assumed it was empty intimidation, nothing more than petty neighborhood power-tripping nonsense. She never imagined a formal lawsuit would actually follow such a ridiculous, baseless confrontation. Now, reality crashed down with suffocating, undeniable weight and fear. Her neighbor Carlos Jimenez stepped outside, noticing her trembling hands and pale, frightened expression. What happened? Setting down his coffee mug on the porch railing, she handed him the lawsuit, watching his face shift from confusion into burning anger. This is absurd. Scanning the absurd figures listed across multiple pages. He had lived beside the HOA boundary for years, watching Diane Whitfield bully countless residents. Carlos had documented incidents before. Suspecting Diane abused her position for personal control and spite, he squeezed Marisol's shoulder, promising her she would not face this fight completely alone. Inside the house, Lily called out, asking why Mommy looked so incredibly worried today. Marisol forced a shaky smile, telling her everything would be okay very soon. Sweetheart. But inside, threatening to swallow every ounce of remaining courage, she thought about her husband, imagining what he would say facing such blatant injustice. He always told her never back down when someone tried bullying the defenseless or vulnerable. That memory ignited something fierce inside her chest, burning away the suffocating fear completely. She would not let Diane Whitfield destroy everything she built through sacrifice and relentless determination. Carlos suggested contacting a lawyer immediately. Someone experienced with predatory homeowner association legal tactics. Marisol nodded, feeling a spark of resolve replacing crushing helplessness. She glanced again at the lawsuit, noticing Diane Whitfield's signature scrawled arrogantly across documents. Something told her this fight would expose far more than one ridiculous kiddie pool. That evening, table surrounded by scattered legal papers and notes. Carlos arrived carrying a folder filled with photographs and complaints against Diane Whitfield collected secretly. He had spent 2 years documenting Diane's pattern of harassment toward minority and immigrant families. Look at this. Sliding photographs of fences, mailboxes. Forward. Every single complaint involved families who looked different from Diane's carefully curated vision of community. Marisol felt sick, realizing she was not Diane's first target, only her latest victim. Carlos explained Diane controlled the HOA board through intimidation, favors, tactics. Members who disagreed with her often faced sudden fines or aggressive legal threats afterward. Most families simply paid, too exhausted or frightened to challenge her relentless campaign of control. Marisol clenched her fists, anger replacing fear as understanding settled heavily across her chest. This was not really about a kiddie pool sitting innocently inside her own rented yard. This was about power. Prejudice. Truly belonged in Sunridge Meadows. The next morning, lawyers before finding one willing to listen seriously. Attorney Rebecca Chin reviewed the lawsuit, eyebrows rising sharply at its obvious legal weaknesses. This case has no merit, Rebecca said. Her lawsuit completely invalid. Marisol exhaled shakily, relief mixing with simmering anger at Diane's outrageous overreach and cruelty. Rebecca explained Diane likely hoped intimidation would force a quiet settlement without proper legal scrutiny. We are not settling, Marisol said firmly, surprising herself with newfound unshakable determination and clarity. We are fighting this publicly, exposing exactly what kind of person Diane Whitfield truly is. Rebecca smiled approvingly, promising to file an immediate motion to dismiss the baseless lawsuit. Meanwhile, reaching out to other families Diane had previously harassed and threatened. One by one, they share their stories about Diane's abusive behavior. A disabled veteran named Frank Delgado described losing his wheelchair ramp approval over petty technicalities. An elderly Korean couple recounted excessive fines for flags representing their cultural heritage and pride. Each story painted a damning picture of selective enforcement disguised as neighborhood beautification standards. Carlos compiled everything into one detailed report, preparing to present it during the upcoming hearing. Word began spreading through the neighborhood, whispers turning into open conversations about Diane's troubling behavior. Diane noticed the shifting atmosphere, her confident smirk slowly replaced by visible nervous irritation. She doubled down publicly, insisting Marisol represented exactly the disorder threatening their precious community standards. Her words now sounded increasingly desperate to neighbors finally paying close attention. Marisol received anonymous messages of support, alongside a few cowardly warnings to simply back down. She refused. Daughter depending entirely on her continued strength. Lily asked again why everyone seemed so tense. Sensing the heavy mood inside their home, Marisol knelt beside her, promising this fight was about protecting fairness for every single family. Someday you will understand we stood up against something deeply wrong and truly unfair, she said. The court hearing date arrived quickly, charged with nervous anticipation throughout the entire neighborhood community. Reporters from a local news station, tipped off by Carlos, requested permission to attend openly. Diane arrived wearing her usual confident smile, completely unaware how dramatically this day would unfold. Marisol walked beside Rebecca and Carlos, gripping a folder filled with damning collected evidence tightly. Inside the courthouse, tension crackled like electricity as both sides prepared their final arguments carefully. Diane glanced at Marisol with lingering disdain, still believing her position remained completely unshakable today. She had no idea the truth about her abusive reign was finally about to surface completely. The judge entered. Authoritative. Measured precision. Rebecca stood first, methodically dismantling the lawsuit's jurisdictional claims point by devastating point. She proved clearly Marisol's rental property never legally belonged within HOA boundaries whatsoever. The judge nodded. Flimsy, poorly constructed legal foundation. Diane shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence rapidly evaporating under mounting legal scrutiny. Then Carlos presented his compiled evidence, detailing years of Diane's documented discriminatory enforcement patterns. Frank Delgado testified about losing his wheelchair ramp despite valid medical necessity documentation provided. The Korean couple described excessive fines targeting cultural flags displayed proudly outside their home. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as pattern after pattern of injustice became undeniable. Diane attempted weak excuses, but her explanations crumbled under direct, pointed judicial questioning. The judge dismissed the lawsuit entirely, calling it frivolous, retaliatory, and legally baseless completely. Relief flooded through Marisol, tears finally streaming freely down her exhausted, grateful face. But the story did not end there, because justice demanded far more accountability today. The local news report aired that evening, exposing Diane's pattern of abusive HOA leadership. Other victims came forward with their own troubling stories. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Diane from her position. Diane stood outside the community center, watching her authority crumble completely before stunned neighbors. Her perfectly curated reputation collapsed overnight, replaced by public shame and widespread community outrage. She faced separate legal action herself, accused of abuse of power and discriminatory harassment. Months later, new evidence forced Diane into a humiliating public settlement. The settlement funded scholarships for immigrant families, named quietly in honor of Marisol's late husband. Lily splashed happily in her kiddie pool, unaware of the battle fought to protect it. Carlos became a respected community advocate, helping families understand their rights against HOA overreach. Frank Delgado finally received his wheelchair ramp, installed with genuine community support and respect. The Korean couple proudly displayed their flags again, celebrated rather than threatened by neighbors. Marisol often thought about her husband, wishing he could witness her hard-fought victory. She knew he would be proud, seeing her courage protect their daughter's bright future. Diane Whitfield eventually moved away, her name forever synonymous with abuse and quiet downfall. The Sunridge Meadows community slowly healed, embracing diversity instead of fearing it. Marisol often told Lily that fairness demanded courage, especially when facing powerful abusive figures. Standing up against injustice, she said, silent or afraid. Their small rented home became a quiet symbol of resilience against unchecked abusive power. Sometimes justice arrives slowly, but it arrives stronger when communities finally choose to fight together.